Hi, Larissa. It's really good to be here in Australia with you, and it's really good to be here at the Carbon Market Institute conference.
Yes.
Where we just saw basically every possible industry that you could imagine. We saw investors, we saw everybody talking about how Australia can get to a low carbon economy.
Yep.
So why was this important to you and below 50 to Australia?
Well, for us, I've just come off stage and did the closing plenary, and it was really around showcasing the importance and value of the corporate, the demand side, and really getting that. We've heard a lot of narrative, and we hear it all the time in regards to renewable energy, and there's a lot of understanding on how there's been great leadership on decarbonising the electricity sector. However, there hasn't been enough around leadership and going forward on how do we decarbonise heavy fossil liquid fuel use. Great today to be able to get that narrative across, but also pinpoint and put that pressure on corporate business, who really is the demand and offtake side, to take an accountability and ownership on driving forward a future low carbon fuel policy within their companies, within their national business model, to decarbonise their fuel use.
Well, it was very interesting, not being from Australia, it was very interesting to hear there was a lot of discussion of transport.
Yeah.
But I do think that when people talk about transport, they are thinking electrification. But Qantas was one of the biggest sponsors and one of the most active participants in this conference. And so they made it very clear that low carbon fuels are absolutely necessary for that industry to decarbonize. What other industries are you thinking about in Australia?
Well, obviously we've got heavy shipping, we've got heavy transport, we've got shipping, we've got the aviation, as you mentioned. Construction and mining are some of the heaviest fuel users for diesel fuel use. And then we've got the opportunities for agriculture to be able to transition across as well. So, and I think clearly understanding as well, you picked up an important note there, Jerry, was that there is a situation in the narrative a lot here that when we think about decarbonising, it's all around electricity, but we've got industries that are going to be heavily reliant on liquid fossil fuels for a very long time. So it's really important that we understand, for the moving the backbone economy of Australia, that we have mining and construction playing and taking full leadership in the uptake and use of lower carbon fuels like renewable diesel. Alternative, obviously, for Qantas's and Virgin's and all of that is doing a biojet blend. And then we've got, as I mentioned, for shipping, is being able to use a renewable shipping fuel, which is in lower sulphur. So getting that conversation happening a lot more. So when people think about decarbonising our transport sector, it's not just electrification. And the problem has been in Australia is our policy leadership on a national level only talks to that narrative. They do not understand the matrix, energy matrix in Australia.
What was really striking was I learned that on a per capita basis, Australia actually has the highest emissions per capita. And you have to think that that's because of the energy intensity of the industries and the distances that you have to travel. And so you're right. I mean, and ideally, I mean, we are completely in favor of as much renewable electricity as possible, but not just as a bridge, but well into the future, we're going to need renewable fuels. Another topic that came up was the idea of individual companies committing to be carbon neutral through a combination of offsets and other activities. Can you think of any of the heavy industry companies in Australia that would be good candidates for that?
Well, all of our logistics and freight companies, which is the backbone of Australia in their heavy transport. So there's a great opportunity for procurement of lower carbon fuels. And as I mentioned before in the closing, leadership to be taken. What are the internal low carbon fuel policies?
Right.
They've got policies in place to decarbonise their dependency on electricity, but they have not developed portfolios. And some of those are some of the biggest transportation logistic freight companies in Australia. Because the backbone of Australia in moving goods and services is dependent on B doubles to move freight. Yeah. And as I mentioned, and I have a bit of a joke about it, we're not charging B doubles that go across the Nullarbor Desert, and we will not have some of that infrastructure in place to be able to charge heavy vehicles across Australia.
Right.
So, and that's just one part of it, but there's great opportunities for construction and mining and transport, logistic freight companies, to be able to say and make a commitment, whether it's a B20 blend, whether it's going to be taking on a 1 or 2% renewable diesel fuel program that they're going to do an offtake
just
to support.
To get it started.
Absolutely. 1% is fantastic. And it's a great way for them to decarbonise by using these lower carbon alternative fuels. Yeah.
Well, you certainly made the case for below 50 Australia in the closing plenary. So thank you, and good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.